Hey everybody, this is Jerod from H.A.C.K, and today we'll be doing the second lab of the kit, which is Intro to Linux. So Linux is a super powerful tool, especially in the IT field. Most of the internet is built on Linux, and it is used for so many things, from network administration to almost system administration to almost any kind of IT work. So if you want to go into the field, Linux is a very good tool to use. It's just an operating system like Windows or Mac, but it is used for so much more. So we're going to be using Kali Linux in this lab. And for the rest of the labs in this kit, you're going to be using Kali as well. Kali is a flavor of Linux or a distribution built on the ideas of cybersecurity, network security, and a bunch of IT work in general. There's a bunch of tools pre-included, some of which we will check out in some of the labs. And so this is just a lab to get you comfortable. So we're going to log in. The login information is in the document, so make sure you check that out. And now we are into Kali Linux. So the first thing we're going to do is connect to the internet, because that is pretty important for some of the future labs. So up here, open your top taskbar here. You see a little Ethernet symbol, so I'm connected by Ethernet. If you're connected to Wi-Fi, you'll see a little Wi-Fi symbol up there. You see it's wired connection 1. You can actually right-click and look at connection information, or you can right-click and edit your connection. Click what connection you want to edit, click the little cog, and you can manually enter stuff if you need to, but usually DHCP works fine. So there's multiple ways to get around in Linux. For example, if you click the little dragon little Kali logo up here, you can see all the tools that come prepackaged with Kali, which is what makes Kali so cool. We'll be touching some of these tools. We won't be touching all of them because obviously there's so many and they're all pretty in-depth, but I encourage you to go look them up and to see what they do and to play around with them safely, of course, because they're pretty cool. There's a lot to learn. So for example, we can search for network up here, and we get back to the same GUI that we were in before, all the same settings. So for another example, if you want to see our file browser, we can click here, and we will come into our home directory. So the home directory is basically the home base for your account. This is where a lot of your files are stored, and you can click on the file system down here to see a bunch of stuff that your system uses. You can see network resources. And once you're in your home directory, you can actually click on these folders. So we're going to click into lab 2, because that's what we're going to use in this lab. And you see there's a file called delete me and search me. So if we look in delete me, we see it says, great job in getting this far in the lab, take a break if you need to. And search me is the script for the B movie, which we will be doing stuff with here shortly. So there's another way to get there. Obviously, click the little file thing up here, and it'll get you to the same place. Or we can use the terminal. So the terminal is actually what scares people most about Linux, but don't be scared about the terminal. It's actually very powerful. It's very intuitive once you get the hang of it, and there's nothing scary about it. It's just going to take a little bit to get used to it. But once you do get used to it, it usually ends up being faster, less resource intensive, and easier to use than a GUI. And it'll give you a lot more information, and it allows you to be a lot more specific with exactly what you want to do. So I recommend using the terminal as much as you can. So if we want to see where we are in the terminal, we're going to do PWD, which stands for Print Working Directory. And you see we're in the folder home H.A.C.K user. So all of our directories in Linux start with a slash, just like the C or the drive letter in Windows. We just start with a slash. So if we want to see what is in the folder we are currently in, we can do ls. And we see that within this folder, there's a bunch of other folders called desktops, documents, lab 2, lab 4, same stuff we saw when we looked in the file browser. If there are files in this folder, you'll see that as well. So let's move into lab 2. So to do that, we're going to do cd, which is change directory, lab 2. And so once we're in lab 2, we can do ls again. And we see there's the same delete me and search me files as we saw before. So if we want to read one of these files in the terminal, we can use the cat command. So we can do cat delete me.txt. So the only way you can actually search only the file name is if you're directly in the folder where this file exists. So if you're in lab 2, you can do ls and see delete me. But if you're in your home directory, you won't be able to just use the delete me because it won't know where that is. So if you are in a different folder, you can do the whole path, which is just home, H.A.C.K user. So the best thing about Linux is that you can actually use tab line completion. So you can get halfway through typing something and hit tab and it'll autofill it. The one thing you need to watch out for is if you have multiple folders with similar names, such as we have lab here, it'll actually not know which one to go into. So you just need to specify. So we'll go lab 2. And so doing that, we get the same message that we got before. So we know that we were looking at the right file, and just showing that you can do something multiple ways in Linux. So if you want to search within a file, like using Control F on a web page or on a document, we can do that in Linux as well. So you can do grep, the grep command. So let's search for John Travolta within our file, which is located at home, hack user, lab 2, search me.txt. So that's the B movie script. And so it searches through the file and pulls a line of John Travolta in it, which is the line, why not, isn't John Travolta a pilot? So as you see, there's only one thing returned there. We can actually search for something that is used much more in the movie, like B, and you'll see that it'll pull all of the file, all the lines in the file that contain the word B, which is very useful for finding things in large files. So as you see, I went up on the arrow keys to actually go back, and it actually saves all your commands. And so you can actually use the arrow keys up and down, so you don't have to retype stuff as much. So we searched for John Travolta. Let's search for another great actor. Let's search for John Wayne. So as you see, it returned nothing. So what this did is it went into this file and searched for John Wayne, but John Wayne is never mentioned in the B movie, unlike John Travolta. So it brings back just nothing. So you know if you search something in a file and it returns nothing, it's not in that file. So let's say you want to find a file on your system, you don't know where it is. The best way to do that is the locate command, but we need to do a little bit of setup first. So let's start by clearing our terminal. So you can do that by doing clear, or you can do Control L. So we can do clear. Either way works. And let's go back to our home directory. So if you ever get lost, you can always do cd tilde, and that will always take you back to your home directory. So if you don't know where you are, you just want to get back home, cd and tilde, which is this key right below escape, that will get you back. So let's do update db. So what this does is it basically prepares the locate command and updates it with all of the current location for files and folders. So if you don't run this, it might be running on outdated information and give you the wrong location, and it won't really work very well. So when we do that, you'll see permission denied. So what you're gonna have to do is put sudo or sudo in front of it, and basically this stands for super user do, and basically elevate your privileges. It acts as almost like you're running it as an admin on Windows, and so there's a lot of commands that you need to run sudo in front of, and usually if you don't, it'll tell you. So we're gonna do that. It's gonna ask for your password again. And in Linux, when you type your password into the terminal, it doesn't show. So just know that you are typing in your password. I've had people get tripped up on that before, but just finish typing your password and enter. So it's gonna take a second to run, especially the first time. So just give it a second, and it's going to return. And now we can do locate. So let's locate the file called findme.txt. Not located, just locate. And so you see that it says the findme.txt file is in home, hack user documents findme.txt. So let's go see if it's right. So we can do cd again and type in that full path. So we went to the documents folder, because remember this is just the file, so we can't actually cd to the file, we can only cd to the folder that's in. Do ls. And you can see it says findme.txt. Also, what I just did there, I accidentally put an extra key there, and so Linux doesn't really know what the command is because it doesn't know what the ls tick is. And so if it's just going to kind of hang, and so if that happens, just do Control C and it'll end the command. So it's kind of good to happen. So we see that it is correct, the locate command, it was correct. We did ls, and we see that within the documents folder, the findme file does exist. So let's go back home and let's clear. So what we're going to do now is we are actually going to make a directory. So making a folder in Linux, you do that by doing makedir, mkdir, and let's make a folder called temp. So we do ls. Now we see there is a temp folder in here. And so let's go into the temp folder. And let's create a file. So to create a file, it's slightly different than creating a folder. Do touch. Let's do test.txt. So touch will just make a blank empty folder, or a blank empty file, excuse me, and everything in Linux is seen as a file. So this is always a great place to start, because changing these extensions to that .txt will change it to whatever you need it to. Usually text files works pretty well. Excuse me. So we just created the file. Let's do ls. You can see there's a test.txt file here in here. So we want to rename that file or move that file. They actually both use the move command. So if you do mv, if you want to change the name, you do the current file you want to move or change, and you just type the new name after it. So let's change it to test2.txt. We do ls again, and you see the name has been changed to test2.txt. If we want to move the file, so let's move it to our desktop, we can do move test2.txt to home hack user desktop, and you see it has moved it to our desktop. If you want to copy it, you can do that same command, but you can use the cp command instead of mv. So if we want to delete a file, let's move into the desktop. So let's go back to our home, ls, see where we are, cd to desktop. And if we do ls again, we can see that the test2.txt file is here. If we want to remove it, we can just do rm test2.txt, and you see it deletes itself. Nice and easy. So also, finding information in Linux is pretty easy. So if you ever get stuck or get confused or you don't know what things are, first thing I recommend is a Google search. There's a lot of good documentation online about Linux. There's a lot of good community forums, and I promise whatever problem you've had, people have had before and people have solved before. So make sure to look things up. But there's also documentation within Linux. So if you don't know what a command does and you want to read more into it, you can actually use the man command, which is the manual, to find information on almost any command in Linux. So we can do man ls, for example. And it pulls up this big page, its name, what it does, how you use it with its synopsis, and then all its arguments. So after every command in Linux, you can put arguments and options afterwards. For example, /all, which does all files. So usually ls just shows you files and folders. This will show you all the files that start with a dot, so it's usually system files or stuff like that. You can do hide, you can do ignore. So there's a lot of commands. So make sure, if you don't know exactly how to use a command, use the man file, or use the man command, look through it, and then to get out of it, let's do q to get out. So let's do ls. Let's go back to our home and then do ls, and you see all this stuff. And if you do ls/all or ls/a works as well. You can see all this stuff is actually in this folder, but you'd have never seen it if you didn't do /all. So generally doing ls is fine, because most of the files you want to see, you're going to find in ls. But sometimes you need to look for a file that starts with a dot, and you can see all of that with /all. That's something you're never going to be able to see from your file explorer without changing a bunch of stuff. So, and clear again. So let's create a new test file. So let's go to the desktop, just because it's easier, more visual. And we're going to install, recommend you guys install a third-party text editor. There are a few ways to look at text files within Linux, like the cat we already showed you, and things like VI and Vim are generally installed, but those are pretty old and they're kind of annoying to deal with. So we're going to recommend you install a third-party app such as LeafPad or Notepad QQ. Either of those are very good. There are also ones like Nano that's pretty good. There's a bunch of them. You can look up like best text editors on Linux if you're curious. So we're going to do that by looking into the App Store. So you might have thought Apple invented the App Store. They did not. It's been around for a long time. So there's a few different ways to do it depending on your distribution. But this Kali happens to use apt. So we're going to use sudo apt-get install LeafPad. Some of the other ones you install. So as you see, LeafPad has already been installed. For you, it'll just install, and once it finishes, it is fully installed. And so let's create a file with the touch command again. And we can test if LeafPad works by just doing LeafPad. LeafPad. Yes, that's what I wanted. LeafPad. And you can see here, it opens it in a nice text editor. World. And if we do that again, you can see it saved it. I did Control S to save. You can do file save as well. And it's just nice, a lot nicer way than using Vi or Vim. And that's the end of the lab. Make sure you go fill out that quiz, test your knowledge, play around in Linux. It's very fun. It's pretty intuitive. There's a lot to learn. Every time you think you know everything about Linux, there is so much more to learn. Make sure you get comfortable, move around, create some files, delete some files. Just make sure you get used to it. And that's it for the lab. Hope you guys enjoyed.